First, thank you everybody for coming. It's so nice to see all of you here. I know my dad would have been and is happy to see all of you here. When I was trying to think about what to say today, I was thinking about the president's re-election campaign and his motto for going with the campaign was forward. And I thought, boy, that is exactly how my dad lived his life. It didn't matter what happened to him, he kept always moving forward. He was born September 1929, just several weeks before the onset of the Great Depression. And of course that made for some difficult times in his household growing up. But he and his family, they kept moving forward. His father was a chemist for U.S. Steel and was going to Carnegie Tech to get a degree in metallurgical engineering. And because of the difficulties of the Depression, he actually had several nervous breakdowns and, again, a difficult childhood. There were other things associated with that at home that was tough for him. But he kept moving forward. He didn't let that slow him down. He graduated from Swissvale High School, went to Grove City College, graduated there. But he graduated in the midst of the Korean War. And he's told me about how when he was nearing graduation, the draft board contacted him and wanted his services, and he was deferred until he graduated. And going through his papers the past 2 weeks, I've actually found the documents that show me exactly what went on at the time. He was, when he was graduating, he was going to be drafted for his 2 years of service there, and he thought, I don't know if I want to spend 2 years in the front line in Korea. So he decided his way to move forward would be to enlist with the Air Force, where he spent 4 years in the Air Force and actually served a year in Korea. But in moving forward that way, he also found his career. He found what is now called human resources. The Air Force had some acronym for that back then, and I don't know what it is, but he ended up doing that for his entire career. By choosing to join the Air Force, he found his life's work. So after the Air Force, he's back in Swissvale, and he meets my mother at church and marries her. And they are living in Regent Square, and he's working for what was then New York State Natural Gas. The gas company merged with a couple other gas companies, and they told him, your job's moving down to this small little town in West Virginia. And he didn't want to go to West Virginia. So he kept moving forward and found a job here in Pittsburgh, except that job disappeared in about 6 months, and he went back to the gas company and said, I think I will go to West Virginia. And he did, and he moved down there. And even though he told me that when the town that I was born in is called Bridgeport, and whenever my mother first went down there and they pulled into town, she just started crying when she saw what it was like. But they kept moving forward, and they found that it actually was a great place to be, and they thought it would be a great place to raise a child. The problem was they couldn't have children. And they, though, kept moving forward, and they decided they were going to adopt. And they were going through the process, and when I was probably a couple years older than my oldest son Logan, I was probably 12, and my father, let me say this first, I was sure as a child that I was adopted. And I don't know why I thought that. I just thought, I don't look anything like him. Of course, people now tell me that I do, indeed. But I went into his filing cabinet and I pulled out, he asked me to pull a file for him, and I'm going through and I found a file marked adoption folder, and I thought, oh my word, I'm right. And I'm flipping through, and I get to the last sheet of paper and it says, from the adoption agency, congratulations. We understand Mrs. Henderson's pregnant and is due next month, and in fact that was when I was born. But the way the regulations were back then, that then disqualified them from being able to adopt, and I was an only child. But we kept moving forward. I never thought anything about growing up as an only child. I now have 4 wonderful little children, and it is, I think, a little bit hard for me to believe, looking back, what it was like growing up as an only child, having all this chaos in my house now. But it was what it was, and so we just kept moving forward with that. But then, when I was in high school, my mother had cancer, and she died when I was 17. And of course, that was hard. And as a 17-year-old losing my mother, especially an only child, I looked to my father, and I did what he did, and that was we kept moving forward. The two of us down there kept doing what we were doing. And he could have just remained in that station in life, but he didn't. He met my stepmother, Betty, who also was in this Swiss Gulf Presbyterian Church where I met my mother. And he knew her before he met my mother, actually, and then used this opportunity to get back together with her. And they got married a little less than 2 years after my mother died. He just kept moving forward. He wasn't going to let these things slow him down and stop him. And they had a wonderful time together. They traveled the world. They did so much. My dad, he started playing his bagpipes when he was 12 years old. Even whenever he moved to West Virginia, he didn't let that slow him down. He stayed in his van here in Pittsburgh and did 4-hour round trips to play his bagpipes. Always moving forward. But Betty eventually also had cancer. And just a month after the two of them moved into Longwood, she died. Of course, that was difficult, but he kept moving forward. And it wasn't too much later, of course, that he met Joan. And they had their wonderful time here together, always moving forward. About 10 years ago is whenever he found out he had Parkinson's. And that is a difficult thing to hear. And for many people, I'm sure it would stop them where they were. But not my dad. He kept moving forward. If he had been famous instead of Michael J. Fox, my dad would have been the poster child for how to deal with this terrible disease. He never let it bother him. He never, not one time, complained about it. He just kept doing what he was doing, kept moving forward, kept living his life. He was not going to let this slow him down. As recently as the week before he died, my wife Kristen and I came out to see him, and he said, "You know, I've been lucky because I've never been in pain a day in my life." For somebody in his position, who at the very end, who knew what was coming, to say that he's lucky is just a remarkable way to view life. And that is what he did with everything. I've been told by a lot of the staff here in the past month that I've been coming out a lot to see him, and then since he died, that there's a lot of people who live here who can do things and don't. And he couldn't do things, but he did. He just always was moving forward. And I have to tell you that sometimes that caused some anxious moments for me, for my wife, for the staff here, because there were some times when he probably should have sat down and not moved forward. It was difficult for him, especially at the end, to walk, but he kept going. He kept going to the Pops, to the River City Brass Band, to Pirate Games. He kept doing it, and he wasn't going to let anything slow him down. One of the things that really kept him moving at the end were these four little ones sitting in the front row. They really meant everything to him, and it's a lot easier to keep moving forward whenever there are things to keep moving forward for, and they kept him moving forward. He told me recently that this has been the best time of his life. And again, that's with Parkinson's. But he still thought it was the best time of his life because he got to see me grow up and have a career and get married and be best man at my wedding, which is, despite all the great friends I've had, was an easy decision for me when it came time to choose my best man. He was the best man in my life. He is the best man in my life. So today, we're here to remember him, to remember all of the good times, the times when he was moving forward. He had a great life, and we may be a little sad today, but we're going to remember how great a life he had and what a great example he's been to, I know, to me and my family, and I'm sure to many of you. And so I think that what we need to do is to be like him. And even though he's gone, we're going to keep moving forward and always remember the way that he chose to do that too. Again, thank you so much for coming.